In the name of God, whose power working in us can do infinitely more than we can ask or imagine. Amen. Please be seated. It's so good to be back with you today. It's been quite a while since I was here. I think that I might have been with you right as you were starting to meet in person again, near the end. Well, the pandemic isn't really ended, but as we were starting to reclaim some more normal things. But that's been a while, so thanks for inviting me to be here today. So, 50 years ago, this fall, I moved into the dormitory at Hope College as a freshman, so now you know how old I am. I met that first day and week 3 young women my age who became my lifelong friends. We graduated, we went to each other's weddings, we knew each other when we had young families, but over the years we all moved apart, far apart. So we exchanged Christmas cards and so on, but we really lost touch most of the time with one another. Until about 8 years ago, I was back in the town where we had gone to college, and I contacted 2 of the women who still lived in Michigan, and I said, it's a long shot, but I'm going to be in town all week if you have time to come. And they did, and we got together, and that started us. We contacted the other woman, and the 4 of us have been getting together annually since then, until COVID. But what happened with COVID was we started Zooming every month, and that really made us get to know each other better and fill in all those intervening decades. Sometimes I've gotten off those Zoom calls and I've said to my husband, Mark, I don't know what I have in common with these women, except that we went to college together. We were friends a long time ago. And then other times I get off of the Zoom call and I say, wow, I am so grateful for their friendship. I'm so glad to spend time with people who knew me way back then and who share some of my memories, with whom I can laugh and laugh about some of the goofy stuff we did. Our friendship is bonded because of how long we've known one another and how important those early years of our friendship were in our life's journey. So last month, in October, we got together for 5 days, and at some point in the time together, the conversation turned to politics, a topic we had usually avoided, knowing kind of that we didn't all think the same. One of my friends was expressing her opinion, and she said how worried she was about the upcoming election. She just thought the country's headed in the wrong direction, and she was very worried about it. And another friend said, I disagree with your political views, but I also am very worried about our country and the direction that we're going. My third friend went into another room and curled up on the couch with a book. Discussions like this are often very uncomfortable, which is why we avoid them, right? We don't want to talk about this stuff if we think we might not all share the same views. But that day, the other 3 of us stayed around the dining room table, and we began to talk and share honestly, and to listen to each other. It was kind of uncomfortable, especially at first. And at the same time, it was really cathartic, because we had known that we didn't all share political views, and now the elephant in the room had been named. We talked, we listened, we found points of agreement, and we acknowledged that our deep longings and hopes were the same. Our fears were the same. What we shared in common as lifelong friends, as people of faith, and as citizens of a country that we love was far more important than how we planned to vote. I tell you this story because my friendship with these women is just a tiny representation. It's a glimpse of something that is much, much bigger. Our relationships with our families, within the church, in our neighborhoods, in our cities and states. We are diverse Here in this room, we are diverse. We have different views, different ideas about how to achieve the good. But what we share in the church, and what I believe most of us in the entire country share in common, is a longing for justice, peace, goodwill, and the good, the common good. Within the church, what we share is deep and strong, and our salvation, the ultimate good, does not reside in politics, but in Jesus Christ. However you feel about last week's election, our scriptures today offer a word of hope. Isaiah's words are clearly a vision of hope, a new heaven and a new earth, peace and reconciliation, long life free from disease and worries, prosperity for all. It is God's vision of shalom, when the world will be restored to the good that God intended in creation. You might say it's an image of beloved community between all humanity and the animals and the earth itself. God's gift of creation and shalom, beloved community. Now, it's a little harder to read hope into the gospel lesson. I don't know if you were paying much attention, but it was kind of doom and gloom. The destruction of the temple, wars and insurrections, nation rising against nation, earthquakes, famine, plagues, all these terrible things that we read about every day when we open our newspapers, or that we hear about when we turn on the news. There are some people who read this passage and other passages like it and say, look, all these things are happening now. That means the end time is near. And there are some who use this passage and others like it to instill fear. Christ is coming soon in judgment. Are you ready to meet your maker? You know, hell is really hot. But here's the thing. These things were happening in the time of Christ, and they've been happening. They were happening when the Gospel of Luke was written down, and they have been happening throughout the millennia, just as they are happening today. This kind of writing, it's an apocalyptic passage, and there are many of them scattered throughout the scriptures. They were included in the scriptures not to incite fear, but to inspire hope. If you look around and see all these terrible things happening, if you look around and are fearful, Jesus says, do not be afraid. The things you see around you, even if they seem permanent and indestructible like the temple, are not of ultimate importance. They are not what ultimately endures. The first century Christians for whom this gospel was written faced real persecution and death, betrayal and loss. They had witnessed the destruction of the temple. Jesus says, suffering and destruction are real, but they are not of ultimate importance. Perseverance in faith is how you will gain your soul. So does this mean we shouldn't be engaged in politics? Not at all. Our vote is important, and working for change, working for the common good, working for justice and peace, all these are part of working for Christ and his kingdom. But if our politics prevents us from being beloved community, we will have placed our trust in the wrong thing. Just as my story of my friends is like a little vision, a microcosm of differences in the world, in our country, and in our church, in our families, Isaiah, the vision that Isaiah puts out is something that we can hold on to, and the church can be a microcosm of that, the beloved community, a place where there is kindness and respect. And to borrow from St. Paul here, beloved community is patient, kind, Beloved community is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Beloved community is built on respect. It does not gloat or despair. Beloved community listens. It hopes. Beloved community calls us to remember that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. Beloved community acknowledges differences of thought about how to achieve justice. As presiding Bishop Michael Curry says, if it's not about love, it's not about God. And if we allow our differences to cause a rift in our community, we are missing the point. We are placing our hope and our trust in things that do not endure. St. Paul says, love never ends, but as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. For we know only in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. When I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now, we see in a mirror dimly, but then we will see face to face. Now I know only in part. Then I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now faith, hope, and love abide, these three, and the greatest of these is love. Amen.